Welcome to the Raised by Giants end of the year wrap up show. 2023 has been an amazing year for me and the show, and I hope that it's been an amazing year for you too. And I thought that I would put together some clips from previous shows, maybe some that were overlooked during the year or didn't get a lot of attention, and maybe some that were really popular, and maybe some that I really enjoyed. But regardless, I've done a lot this year. I directed and edited a full-length documentary film with Jay Widener called JFK X Solving the Crime of the Century, which is a very great success. That's on Amazon Prime Video. It's always been my dream to make a film, and ever since I was really young, and I did it. And I feel like it's an amazing achievement, and we're already working on documentary number 2, which will be released later next year. I did a full-scale deep dive into the DIA Army Intelligence Remote Viewing Program. I interviewed everyone that was officially a part of that program that would come on my show and talk with me. Dr. David Morehouse, Angela Ford, Dr. Paul Smith, Lynn Buchanan, and the director of the Stargate program himself, Dale Graff. And I even did something that had never before been done with bringing all of those people together for a roundtable discussion about the Stargate program. I did a deep dive into UFO cults. I figured out where these thoughts and ideas and theories come from about extraterrestrials. And newsflash, they all come from these UFO cults. I did 14 episodes of that series, which there's a playlist on my channel of all of those if you haven't listened to those yet. I put together a never done before roundtable discussion called Monarch Extraterrestrial Stargate Roundtable with Kathy O'Brien, Dr. David Morehouse, and Walter Bosley. It's been a really great year, guys, and I appreciate each and every one of the viewers and the people that's helped support my show and shared my content and been in my live chats. It means a lot to me. The Ryder Rangers, baby, and we will continue in to 2024. And to all of my guests, I appreciate each and every single one of you guys too. And if someone that I had on the show that watches this and they don't see themselves in the best of 2023 video, I couldn't fit everyone in, guys. You were all amazing and you're all great and you all are the best. But if I were to put everyone into the video, it would have been like a 4-hour long video. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope that you see something that you missed and you go back and watch the full video. And here's to a prosperous 2024. We'll see you guys next year. Do you think that JFK had any kind of knowledge of advanced craft that we might have been developing? And if he did, that have anything to do with his assassination?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. In all the years that I've studied that assassination and the whole issue of Black Project's research, other than one document, which is the Torbit document, I've not seen any documentary evidence that he was given any sort of more than normal access to those programs. I do suspect that he, like President Eisenhower, who both of them had reached the conclusion that the military-industrial complex was already out of control. And, you know, if that's going on in the late 50s and 60s, imagine what it is today. But I strongly suspect that both men were able, by dint of their personal contacts, to gain some sort of above normal access to what was going on in those projects, although it would have been, by the nature of the case, unauthorized in their case. Kennedy, of course, as you mentioned before we started the recording, you wanted to talk about Secretary Forrestal. Kennedy was of course a close friend with Secretary John Forrestal, and Eisenhower certainly knew him and had similar connections. within the military. So both men, I suspect, had some sort of knowledge of those things. Now, in Kennedy's case, I mentioned the Torbett document for a reason, because in that document, which, if people don't know what it is, the Torbett document is a kind of a compendium or a summary of the research that came out of Jim Garrison's investigation when he was conducting his investigation of Clay Shaw. The Torbett document is kind of a compendium of all of that stuff that was put together by an attorney in southern Texas. And incidentally, that attorney was a member of Lyndon Johnson's political machine. So in other words, this guy was connected. But anyway, in the Torbett document, there is a brief reference to something called DISC, the Defense Industrial Security Command. And it spells DISC, obviously. This was allegedly some sort of special security unit that was established to watch those kinds of technologies. And guess who the head of it was? Werner von Braun. So if Kennedy knows anything, I suspect that given his frequent appearances, and you have to go to the photographic record to see this, but when Kennedy goes and visits NASA, he's usually seen in the company of 2, if not 3 people, all the time. And that's James Webb, the head of NASA at the time, and then Werner von Braun and Dr. Kurt Davis. And, I've written reams about Dr. Kurt Davis, but Kennedy's usually seen in their company. And to me, that's very suggestive that if there is a private, so to speak, gateway for that information to get to Kennedy, it's those 3 that are going to be providing it to him. So yeah, I think he's got access, but again, like I say, I've not seen rigid, hard documentary evidence of it. I'm constructing a case on the fly here because your question's so good. I don't think anybody's ever really asked that.
Speaking of this, this real rudimentary secret space program, and again, that's going to be like a really I think we just need to make up a different title for it because it's gotten a really bad name. But you've written several books on this. You've written books on the Sonora Aero Club and on NIMSA and all that. And you've made a lot of good connections for a lot of this technology and a lot of these UFOs actually being our technology and the technology that we've created on our own. So I think that this is a very important time to kind of go back and touch on that. And I know that we've talked about it in previous interviews, but I think right now it's the most important thing to really be discussing, because I do believe that there is a real element to this, but again, it's just been overshadowed by all of this bullshit nonsense, and that's served as a cover so that the governments and the 3-letter organizations don't have to take responsibility or reveal any of the technology that they have created on their own.
Right. Well, if you'll notice, a couple of years back, I think I started referring in this discussion I started calling it classified space ops to get away from using the SSP secret space program moniker, because as you said, that's been kind of tainted by the nonsense. But when you go back and look through the history of aviation in the United States in particular, which naturally leads to space, space aviation, as it were, you really begin to see where the pursuit of going into space was actually there much earlier in a serious way. We're not talking about, everybody knows the rocket engineers and stuff. When they were little boys, they read Jules Verne, blah, 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 and it inspired. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the actual aviation scientists, excuse me, aviation scientists dating back to the late teens and early 1920s, they were seriously thinking, how do we get into space? Okay, they were pursuing this in aviation medicine. Now, a lot of people, myself included, I would never have guessed that aviation medicine would reveal as much about what I think was classified, space ops as it does. And one of the things that you'll learn is when you look at Operation Paperclip and you discover that the seed for that, the origin for that, wasn't about the bomb, getting the bomb scientists. The origin of Operation Paperclip started with one of our top aviation medicine scientists and pilots, Colonel Harry Armstrong. At the end of World War II, he was, before the war, the German aviation scientists and aviation medicine specialists, and the Americans and the Europeans, they all knew each other. They were going to the same scientific conferences and they were sharing notes and ideas. And then, of course, politics and the war happens. And at the, as we're approaching the end of the war, the Allies are controlling, there's an area, it's in Heidelberg, and they put together this list of aviation scientists of the Luftwaffe of Germany that they want to get their hands on and bring to the United States. So the brainchild of Operation Paperclip came out of the aviation medicine field, and it was to get the German experts that had these big reputations that Armstrong and the others knew personally. They wanted to get them in America for, what was clearly going to be a post-war pursuit of putting man in space. And this was the impetus for Operation Paperclip, not just the bomb, not even primarily the bomb. And when you look more closely at the way it went down, there's reason to suspect that actually Operation Paperclip was a German idea. In other words, that the scientist associates of Armstrong said, hey, we have an idea. Why don't, you bring us, to the States and we'll work for your side, that kind of thing. And yeah, we'll help you put man in space. So it really dates back to before Roswell, the serious pursuit of this. Now, some people know, those who've read my book, Shimmering Light, that my hypothesis I propose reflects what I was just talking about. And my hypothesis for Roswell is that it was not an extraterrestrial incident. In my hypothesis, all the elements, the historical elements that this is a matter of record, all the elements are in place in New Mexico for Roswell to actually have been a first classified attempt at putting man in space by the United States, working with the paperclip German aviation scientists and aviation engineers.
They send agents to convince him that he's seeing aliens and to float the idea that these things are aliens. They did it to cover the test flights of the stealth aircraft. They encourage stories about aliens. Why would they do that? To cover the truth, which is that this is black budget technology. We've got trillions of dollars disappearing into a black hole every year. We've got Ben Rich saying we've got the technology to take ET home. And we've got things out there in the desert that would make George Lucas, jealous. Who knows what they have? But aliens is a great cover story,
Yep.
Because people will then go chase shadows. They'll be looking for aliens, not looking for black budget technology.
Yeah, I saw this tweet and I retweeted it from John Greenwald Jr. And I think that this is a good summary for what we're talking about here. It says, the I want to believe syndrome. Syndromes include the sacrificing of logic, common sense, and good old-fashioned research in exchange for simply the belief in something without solid or supporting reasoning to do so. It's rampant, and it's not just limited to one topic. And I thought that that was perfect, because that's exactly right. It's the I want to believe, right? So I'm just going to take any information as true, right? And my personal belief is that the secret space program and the super soldier asset testimony is used as a dual use as well, right? It's not only used as an experiment on the public to see what we can get people to believe, but it also serves as a cover-up to cover up real operations that might be going on the planet, or what possibly might be going on with the militarization of space. Right? They don't want people figuring out really what they're doing up there. So they've implanted and done these experiments on these people to shift responsibility, to make them about this extravagant space 20 and back fighting aliens, fairy tale nonsense in space. And if you get everyone talking about that and believing in that, then it covers up the real thing that might actually be happening here, like real programs, real operations, and real programs and real operations that might be happening in space as well.
Right. And as long as we're on that topic, I know that when it's like one of the experiments that there is a real secret space program. I just want everybody to know that. And that has existed, I would say, since we brought Wernher von Braun over in 1937. He didn't come after the war.
Yeah, he came soon. He came quick.
Was here in 37. Yep. And he was the Nazis were very involved in our space program and our rocket program, as Jack Parsons and all the rest reveal. So, but they are doing experiments in space, which are chemical, which are electromagnetic. It's as though they're taking our technology into space in a very different kind of environment, extremely different. It is not like it is here. And they are running those experiments to see what they can create in space. And they are creating various plasma entities up there. I know that. But as far as I can see from the secret space program, MK Ultras I've met, and I've met just a few, like maybe 3. It seems that what they're working on with them is not so physical as chemistry and electromagnetics. They're working on them psychically, what they can produce in psychic experiences that they can be made to have. Now, as to whether that entails entities that are conscious and they are communicating with them and all of that, I really don't know. But I think I'm kind of like you, Ryder. My main job, and I am on a mission for sure, is this planet, is this humanity. And I consider a lot of things being sent to us in the internet, etc., to be distractions from my mission. So I'm much more interested in figuring out, like, that's why I'm a big student of Rudolf Steiner, figuring out what humanity really is and its greatness, its extraordinariness, that you have this spiritual being that is concentrating on developing a free will and love and all those qualities, certain qualities, out of their own struggles here in a physical plane existence. I find that to be plenty on my plate to understand, so that I could support it, because it seems to me that humanity is always under assault by some faction. We've had secret societies for thousands of years, and some of those secret societies have been supportive of humanity and inimical to humanity. There are all kinds of entities here. Some are benign, some appear to be evil, as we call it. So, there's a lot going on here, and just to figure this out is really my main task.
I'm always confused by the UFO community to a certain extent. I mean, I think I understand what they're after, but then there are all these factions. There's one faction of it that thinks that alien races are going to save humanity from itself. There's another that thinks that, okay, now they're going to come in and kill us all, like War of the Worlds kind of stuff. Or there's another faction of it that is, we have a right to know everything the government knows about alien technology. And if there is any, or if there's little gray men in freezers somewhere, we have a right to know, because we have a right to know. And my point is, on the right to know, you don't have a right to know. It's not, that's like saying you have a right to know everything the CIA is doing. That's never going to happen. To think about something like that or to throw that out, that's so Pollyannish and immature to think that your sense of entitlement allows you to just slam your fist on the table and say, tell me everything you're doing. That's not going to happen. And no, it's not your right.
Me, his office at General Dynamics, a then top secret stealth. Here was this triangular stealth that wasn't in any of the school books, wasn't being talked about anywhere. It looked like a spaceship to me. I'd never seen anything like that. And everything that J. Bennett Johnson was doing and he was involved in certainly was alien to me. So it was easy for me to accept the idea that what was happening was in fact being perpetrated by aliens. But what I am saying is that it was my experience that these were people claiming to be aliens. If there's a reality out there pertaining to any alien influence, we need to sort out the government misinformation and disinformation and mind manipulation techniques that they're using. I know for a fact that the plan is to make all of us feel totally helpless, that what's happening is beyond our realm to affect because we've been taken over by aliens, that our Independence Day is dawning.
How do you feel about watching that from back in 1992?
Oh yeah, I mean I've been speaking up for 35 years. My testimony is the same. Truth is like that, it's just rock solid, and then it gets twisted and distorted by other people's perceptions when they want to add to it, and especially like the free ebooks of my testimony that are posted all over the internet and altered to fit their perceptions or their political agenda or whatever. But most of all, to keep us in a state of victim mentality, because as long as we feel victimized, we feel like we don't have the power to do something about these perpetrators, this handful that's creating all these illusions of power over us, whether they're playing the demon card or the alien card. So it's so important that people, really look at that aspect of things first. So many after the fact who said that, they were abducted by aliens, they stepped back from it a little bit, deprogrammed that program by writing it out, and all of a sudden remembered, oh yeah, they did come up in a military Jeep and they were wearing military clothes, and then all of a sudden they look at it a little bit differently than what was projected into their mind and manipulated into their mind through deliberate MK Ultra means. I think ultimately, from my experience around these perpetrators and my experience in the alien theme, MK Ultra mind control programming, that it's such a shallow diversion from the reality of all the amazing things in life that we have to explore. There's so much possibility out there, and so many miracles and possibilities and dimensional aspects, and just so much more than this narrow, fear-mongering alien perspective they're wanting to project on us.
Kathy, did you or anyone that or like I said, yourself, have any kind of new abilities after this process through the MK Ultra program, whether that be clairvoyance, clairaudience, astral abilities, telekinesis, anything along those lines?
Well, I think it's been interesting listening to how the government agencies were attempting to study things, and they're looking like the whole wrong direction. In my case, because my brain was compartmentalized, not just an agency, my brain was compartmentalized, where the neuron pathways of the brain actually shut down from various traumas. So there's no intercommunication between the various compartments set up in the brain. This part of my brain didn't know what this part had done, and therefore I had heightened endurance because I didn't know, it didn't signal my body to be tired. There's all kinds of things that happen with the compartmentalization in the brain, including a shutting down of an ability to think free, because there is no firing happening. There's no capacity for any free thought, no conscious free thought at all. The subconscious is wide open to being easily led and manipulated, and the subconscious is like highly suggestible. So with that said, that was I had no free thought of my own, no capacity to think for myself until after I healed. The first 30 years of my life were spent in doing what others told me to do and carrying out their bidding, no matter what it was. And I couldn't think to say no, and I couldn't think to not do it. Because I had no capacity for thinking, my brain was like blasted into other parts where I had a heightened senses, a real strong sense of energy and heightened intuition. And it went into an ability to understand telepathy, complete telepathic communication, and a whole level of thinking and operating that is something that I don't think can be studied, because it goes into such a deeper level. It's not something you can hook a brain up to and see happening. And I think it's like a almost a spiritual defense mechanism. And it's one that I've retained, because after I healed and when I did regain my capacity to think for myself and have conscious awareness and open those neuron pathways in my brain, I didn't lose those abilities. I have extreme heightened intuition, and it goes into even the point of dreams, because under mind control, because of the sleep deprivation and the way that my brain was compartmentalized, I had no capacity to dream. I didn't dream for the first 30 years of my life. And when I was regaining my free thought and starting to dream, I would have night terrors. And I didn't want to have night terrors. So I took control of that the same way that I did heal my brain. And that was by picking up a pen and writing it out, because it shifts information to the logic, critical analysis part of the brain, and where it can be consciously dealt with. So I kept a notebook beside my bed, and I would make a note of night terrors. And then that way I was able to stop the night terrors and take control of that aspect of my dreams. Well,
I think that now when you're jumping over to MK Ultra, you are, as David said, you're talking about CIA and nefarious thing. We're talking about that mission creep, nefarious part of MK Ultra that the CIA did. I think those phenomena have a basis in reality, but I think these kinds of things were used by the more nefarious elements within MK Ultra, also to control people as handling implements as control. So, even if something can be real, it can also be used as a false narrative.
You're seeing precisely what they want you to see and nothing more. And it goes right back to this whole thing again. is the CIA is not the Central Information Agency. It's the Central Intelligence Agency. They don't give a crap what you think or anything else. And anything that they looked at, there would have been, right now there's something like, what, 27,000 pages of information are out there, or is it 17,000 documents? And it doesn't matter. Let's round up. It's 100,000 pages. If you counted the amount of the volume of classified data that would have come out of that organization after 20 some odd years of existence, you're looking at a fractional amount, like maybe 10%. And that's giving you a very generous piece of that. The only thing they released were the things that they didn't care about you knowing.
The idea of remote viewing, as I discovered as I began doing this research, I realized, as I said, that people have been doing this for thousands of years. They just didn't call it remote viewing. It really should be called non-local perception, because it's a matter of opening to non-local consciousness and accessing data. And the oracles of Delphi, those 7 oracles, that's an example. The oracle of Siwa, the Egyptians, the talking idol of Siwa, that's an example. The talking idol of Ixchel for the Mayans, that's an example. There's a tribal group in the mountains of Colombia called the Kogi who are still doing it. That is, taking a group of talented young people and training them how to attain and sustain intention-focused awareness, which is the key to the whole thing. There is, contrary to what you will see, there is so much disinformation about remote viewing. There is no one best way to remote view. I've tested 23,000 people, and I tell you that categorically.
Trying to track down the exact date that it actually became a program.
I can give you an exact timeline here. The research effort, the strictly research, began in 1972 at the Stanford Research Institute in Menlo Park, California. And at that time, there were some operational projects that were, you might say, sponsored by the CIA. But the CIA only stayed with the effort for about 1.5 years. And then the researchers at SRI started looking for funding and support, and that's when they came to our organization with the Air Force. And that was in 1976. And that's when I became involved directly as the contract manager. And then, almost coincidentally, you might say, in 1979, 1980, the Army set up a unit at Fort Meade specifically aimed at the operational aspects. So that was the second part of the remote viewing activities in the government. And we had the research continued as it basically had been set up at SRI throughout the whole time frame. But the operational part didn't really start in full force until 1979. That's when the Army Intelligence Command set it up at Fort Meade, Maryland. Now that unit, that Army unit, of course, I worked with them directly through FTD and also through the Defense Intelligence Agency. But that effort continued until about 1985, when the Army transferred it to the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency. So I became then directly involved with both the research and the research because it was, and the operations, because it was now part of the Defense Intelligence Agency. So from 1985 till the program closed, it was under one management function, even though the activity, the operational activity remained in place at Fort Meade, Maryland. We used the same facilities, we just rented it from the Army. So, but it was a DIA activity from 1985 onward.
From my understanding, this kind of started with the CIA funding SRI International. Was the Army intelligence a special access program, and then whenever it got transferred to the DIA, then it became another special access program, or was it not a special access program in the Army?
Let me give you the history of this. It's very confusing because there's really two different tangents to this. There's the SRI, ultimately moved to SAIC in the 90s. There's that research branch, which did some operational work. Then there was the military side of it, which really got off the ground with the Air Force in 1975. And that was a kind of a different branch. Of course, they all, they cross-pollinated all the time. So the research part was never anything but collateral intelligence. It means there's no compartmentation, there's no special access kind of a thing in terms of what they were doing at SRI. Okay. The military side of it started off as just a small, relatively informal, but still budgeted program with the Air Force. In 1979, the Air Force terminated their involvement with remote viewing and with the funding of SRI. And at that point, the behind the scenes actor was the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is a military intelligence organization. They had been working with the Air Force. When the Air Force got out of it, by that time, there's a little bit of overlap. The Army started a program in 1977, very small, in-house, budgeted from the Army Intelligence Security Command, not from Congress. And then DIA started working with the Army more closely when the Air Force left. And at about that point is when they started introducing SAP, okay, the Special Access Program caveat for this unit. And which Special Access Program means that even if you have a security clearance of the correct level, doesn't mean you get to know about this program. Okay. Only a very limited number of people are allowed access to a special access program. They have to have a very explicit need to know. The main reason for that wasn't that we were using parapsychology, remote viewing, anything like that. The main reason was protect us, the sources. Because as far as anybody knew then, and it's still true, there is no way to shield against remote viewing. It seems to be able to get through any shielding you have. It doesn't matter. But the way to stop it is to take out the people doing it, right? And so if the Russians got wind we had a program and it was successful, the worry was they would recognize that the only way to stop it would be to assassinate, essentially, or disable in some way the remote viewers. And so it was the special access program. I mean, there are other reasons, but this was the main one, was meant to protect the remote viewers.
The last one that was mentioned in this SRI document was perturbation of remote equipment. In other words, like you just said, a form of telekinesis, but remote telekinesis, when you can move an object with your mind across the range or distance. So is remote telekinesis possible?
Oh, yeah. In fact, what started the studies on that, the serious studies, SRI and all, Inga Swan went out to Stanford, and they had this, they had this sensor that was buried, I forget how many feet down into the ground, and protected from any magnetic, any electronic, inference at all in any way. And so Ingo stood over the thing and mentally accessed the sensor down at the bottom, and it went bonkers, and it affected it. And we had done some other things. I know I did one time with the Stanford Linear Accelerator, and we never got hard feedback on that because I had set the thing off, and the director said, "We're not going to tell Stanford that we're messing with their experiments." So, but it kind of got through the grapevine, found out that, it had been done.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you've actually done this. You've had experiences with remote telekinesis where you can move an
Oh
object.
yeah, that's how I got into the unit. I had pretty well messed up a few $1 million worth of intelligence computers, and that's why General Stubblebine went out to Germany, got me. He wanted to form a unit where we would affect enemy computers, hopefully with the idea that we could start controlling the enemy computers to make their missiles drop into the sea or turn around and go back at them or whatever. And Congress said, no, that's spice of mind control. We're not going to fund that.
Mm.
They had been caught in the 60s doing mind control experiments. They're not going to take a chance on doing that again. And so General Stubblebine just took me out to the remote viewing unit and put me in there. Yeah.
What was the protocols of how you did your remote viewing? What style of remote viewing were you using there?
Okay, the protocols were always the same. The methodologies is what's different. If you do remote viewing, the protocols always are the same. You can't tell the remote viewer what the problem is. The remote viewer has to answer the intelligence question by remote viewing. So the protocols don't change. It's the methodologies. It's what are you doing to gain the information? Now, people used to use something back when Stanford Research Institute was working back in the early 1970s. They used something that Stanford Research termed extended remote viewing, ERV, and that's nothing more than going into a self-hypnotic state, laying down, closing your eyes, meditating, and coming up with imagery so that you could come back and you have imagery and you access and describe the target. And that was called extended remote viewing, or ERV. We had government officials that were heavily involved in the interest of psychic phenomena. So they would go to Congress and they would ask for money. Well, they would be laughed at. They needed money to pay the salaries for the remote viewers. They needed money to dish out for research and development at Princeton, at SRI, at Duke University. But because these high officials would go to Congress and talk like New Age people, it was a giggle factor. So the Defense Intelligence Agency management went to Stanford Research and said, write something up so when we go to Congress, we won't be laughed at. So they hired Ingo Swann was on staff as a psychic, and they asked Ingo, they said, come up with something. So Ingo came up with the word coordinate remote viewing, and it was a fake coordinate. And then he came up with, well, if you do this and this, you access the site, and then you access the signal line, and then the signal line gives you information. And he did remote viewing in steps. And whatever it was called coordinate remote viewing. And there was a manual on it so that whenever when government officials went to Congress, they could come up with something that looked more technical in nature, more scientific in nature. It was a way to receive monetary funds without being laughed at and to keep the program alive. So there were two methodologies. One was called extended remote viewing and one was called coordinate remote viewing. You had ERV and CRV. When I went into the unit, I was a psychic. I was channeling. I was told I had a bad habit. I couldn't use it, so I didn't use it. So they put me in extended remote viewing because they didn't have many extended remote viewers. There were only 2 or 3 of them, 2 maybe, and then I made the third one, or there were 3 and I made the fourth.
There's a group of people out there, mostly on the internet, that claimed they were a part of a Stargate program that was opening up real portals, like Stargate portals, like from Star Trek, that would allow them to like time travel and go to different planets and stuff and teleport, which is completely preposterous. But I want to get your guys' comments on this to clear up that Army intelligence and the DIA wasn't opening up real Stargate portals so the military personnel could time travel, correct?
Not according to that stuff. No way. No, of course you can argue theoretically that how does this phenomena work at all? Something is being accessed that we don't understand. Now we can give different labels. If I really want to exaggerate and say every time I did a precognitive project, this is after I left the project, was I entering a time portal, a portal hole, or whatever you want to call it? Sure. These concepts aren't bad, but there's nothing we did officially that said we were zipping into a portal of any kind. We just accepted the fact that the stuff worked. We didn't give it that kind of labeling, as some people like to do in the science fiction side.
And there are a lot of people claiming to have been in the unit that were never in the unit and never had anything to do with it.
Where do you think that confusion comes from, though? Do you think that they're actively lying, or do you think that they were possibly a part of something similar, like the Gateway process with Robert Monroe, and they're getting it confused? Or what do you think's going on there? Are they actively lying, or are they making it up, or were they a part of something similar?
The ones I've seen are actively lying. Yeah. But
they're generating a concept which they think will get a lot of attention. So there was a book that came out about a year after or two after the name Stargate that we developed the name Stargate. I think it was called the Stargate Conspiracy, and then there's a TV program. So that took a lot of traction. A lot of people associated our activities, in hindsight, they thought was what we had. So there were terms like portals in that book, but I had absolutely nothing. That was a fiction book. Had absolutely nothing to do with what we were doing. So maybe some of that material from that book, and I think there was a TV program that followed a little later, added to the image of, hey, we're at Fort Meade, we're going into time portals and all that stuff. So it's easy to build from what's in the media and imagine things, but we never did anything. Our concepts had never had anything like that in it.
We haven't learned in how many years of existence about war?
Right.
Then when Ryder, what that says is that we have been so corrupted, so contaminated by these belief systems, believing that killing somehow is righteous, somehow that this is going to carry over into the afterlife as some kind of honor. It's not working. So anyway.
Yeah, and then they've just changed it and turned it into extraterrestrials in order to explain it better, in order for people to wrap their heads around it, instead of it just
going to bring its enlightenment,
a paranormal and a supernatural thing. But then comes the main question here, what happens when people get disillusioned with extraterrestrials and UFOs? What happens then?
Nihilism.
Because I think that we're approaching that point very quickly. I myself am approaching that point rapidly. There becomes a point where we need to be like, where are they? Right? If the universe is so populated and extraterrestrials have been visiting us for thousands of years, like some state in the Vedas and the Hermanas, where are they, Wayne? And guess what their explanation is to this question? It's the exact same explanation that's given in the religious institutions when the preachers and the bishops and the cardinals are asked by their congregations, where is God? Where is Jesus? Right? And everyone knows the answer to that question. They're invisible, right? You can't see them.
That's because they live in you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, And when you look at the ET thing, it's this progression now, because we're seeing the single largest exodus out of, particularly in America, but I understand it's happening pretty much around the globe, where you're seeing this mass exodus coming out of what they call organized religion, primarily Christendom. And so now you got people that are walking out disillusioned. They're looking for an answer. They're spiritual by nature. And so now there's this void. Well, the next one that would be something else would be, what would be closest to akin to God would be an alien, an ET. I mean, they would know God better than we would, because they're traveling in space and we're not. So anything that they have to tell us, well, you could almost take it as the gospel.
There's OHM, but also they say it should have been originally, the AUM. Like I've said to you on many times in your video, if that is the word of the universe, the sound of frequency, that isn't even in the spelling trauma. And other words that are supposed to be a negative type of effect, trauma, yet it's a sound of creation in Om. So these just make you think, like you just mentioned Kundalini and different things like this. So is this the electrical, and how serpents can be shown as an electrical force, electrical stimulus, and you're talking about power-up techniques. You know what I mean? We just re-level things in the modern era. Oh, I've hit this chakra, and you're just powering up. And what is a chakra? Oh, what's a chakra? Oh, and then you Google it for information or look in a book. So and then who is right about what we are reading? That's why I always state to people, just try and treat it as information, because a lot of it we can't validate it. It is just people theorizing back in the day, or interpreting what they said, what they were seeing. Different interpretations, because that's how we perceive things. If you're seeing this type of an electrical event, one person will see it that way, another person will see it this way, and so on and so on. So that person then goes away to his tribe culture in the desert, in the sea, blah, blah, blah. And he'll say, well, I just saw this. Oh, that is a spirit energy, you know what I mean? And then people will say, oh, well, you know what I mean? So we're so restricted in the sense of what's good and bad. I mean, what do we base what's good and bad on? From experience and being taught.
What got me interested in this topic of cults, and more specifically UFO cults, was when I critically analyzed modern ufology, Christopher, and realized that the UFO and extraterrestrial believers that are out there that's touting disclosure, one, they have no proof and no evidence, right? It's
faith-based, which makes it a religion.
Yes, and it's just a bunch of stories. It's based on belief, and the stories that have been brought into the zeitgeist of the modern day, right? Regurgitation after regurgitation, right? And there's no photographic evidence, no video evidence of any extraterrestrial. No one has ever met an extraterrestrial that you can walk out and shake hands with, that you can reach out and touch, right? It's always in an altered state of consciousness somehow, right? A dream state, a meditative state. And what I think a lot of it is under the influence of some sort of drug, right?
And as you pointed out, it could also be the government staging things to freak people out, to play games with their minds. There are a lot of con artists and hustlers. It's an industry. They're making all kinds of money off of it. They copy one another. They regurgitate the same narrative over and over and over again. The government is clearly involved in it. And these cults, it's easy to trace out the religious beliefs that are being expressed through these cults. So they're serving as a cover for messianic prophecies, Kabbalistic beliefs, and Gnostic, Platonic beliefs. And all this began in the 1800s. The Theosophical Society was also a cover for these occultic beliefs. The socialist movement was a cover for occultic beliefs. Mormonism has a lot of these beliefs written into it. A lot of this was sponsored by major financiers, so there was always tremendous amounts of money behind it, and there are clear agendas behind it which mirror the messianic aspirations of the Gnostics and the Kabbalists.